Shovel, Marianne was her name. Two of them were the best darn pair, that was the claim. Mike and Marianne, it's told they dug the great canals, cut through the mountains, filled up the holes, they were the best about. Cause Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan would say, what 100 men could dig in the day. Mike Mulligan and Marianne, they dug the highway straight. Airport runways, landing fields, never had to wait. Mike and Marianne would dig, this they liked the best. How crowds of people standing around always were impressed. Cause Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan would say, what 100 men could dig in a week, she could dig in a day. But then one day a tragedy, the diesel shovels came. Stronger, better, faster too, nothing was the same. Some steam shovels were sold for junk, others rusted through. But Mike would never leave his friend, he was always true. Cause Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan would say, what 100 men could dig in a week, she could dig in a day. So then one day in the newspaper, Mike Mulligan saw that in the little town of Popperville, they're gonna build a new town hall. He told the folks of Popperville, we'll dig that cellar in just one day. And if we're not done when the sun goes down, you won't have to pay. Cause Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan did say, what 100 men couldn't dig in a week, we can dig in a day. So the sun came up, they started to dig, first corner neat and square. Second turn, the sun was hot, dust was in the air. People came, stayed to watch, which made them faster still. They cut away the third corner, gave the crowd a thrill. When the sun was just about to set, the end was getting near. Dust was thick and the shovel ran, and the people started to cheer. Suddenly, all was still, the cellar was neat and square. But Mick and Marianne were stuck, they couldn't get out of there. Well, sometimes the best ideas come from someone who is small. A little boy said, hey, she could be the furnace for the new town hall. What do you think, Mike? Well, Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan did say, a better furnace you'll never find, she'll keep us warm all day. So that's exactly what they did in the town of Popperville. And if you ever go to see, you'll find them down there still. Cause Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan did say, what 100 men could dig in a week, she could dig in a day. Marianne, the steam shovel, Mike Mulligan did say, what 100 men can dig in a week, she could dig in a day.
All right, that gets us going. All right, welcome everybody. Tim's jumping back in his chair and he's gonna unmute himself and we'll get going here. So thanks everyone for joining. And I love the Mike Mulligan, the steam shovel for a couple reasons. I made a couple quick little notes. We all need cheerleaders, you know, and people to believe in us. And that's, I think, why we're all here together to, you know, cheer each other on and to learn. New technology and other ways of doing things are always coming, but there's still value in everything, even, you know, stuff that maybe wasn't once as efficient. Loyalty, hard work, and then listen to others' ideas. So anyway, Tim, how you doing, man?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Good, thanks for joining us today. And this is gonna be a great call because I know you have a ton of experience, and I had people message me offline that were excited to kind of hear your story a little bit. So I'm excited to dive into it.
Cool. Thanks for the invite.
So, and if you can get a little closer, it is a little quiet. You might have to talk a little bit louder, but maybe a little closer to your microphone and then we'll be dialed in. So
how's that?
That's a little bit better.
Okay.
That's a little bit
better.
Okay.
I'm kind of screaming, but it's okay. So,
okay, cool.
okay.
All right. So I want to introduce you a little bit and then fill in the blanks where I miss when I throw it back to you. But I did a little research on you because I haven't known you all that great, right? I had an awesome opportunity to be in a suite with Tim, gosh, last year in a different world when we could go to concerts. I think it was the Chainsmokers, right? Was it?
It was,
Chainsmokers
yeah,
concert?
yep.
Yeah. So that was an awesome concert, and we were able to catch up a little bit there and talk more. But I remember Tim back in like 2001, 2003, 2006, 2007. Man, I'd always see Tim as the buyer's agent buying these HUD homes and other 10.2, properties, delete 10.2 bank-owned properties, and then reselling them. So I know Tim got to start flipping and then progress gradually into bigger deals, multifamily. We're going to talk in a lot of detail about the Maven that he did over on Night South near Liberty Wells and then Salt Flats. But fill in a little bit about kind of your bio, where you're from, and then we'll dive into a lot of the details here in a little bit.
Okay, sure. Yeah, you and I crossed paths. I think we met for the first time last year in person, but I know I've seen your name, especially I saw your name a bunch, 2010, 2011, 2012. Every property I didn't get, you got, MS2 got. So I remember, who is this guy? So we never met until then. But we've known of each other. So I'm from Michigan. I was born in Detroit. My dad, when I was 8 years old, my dad was a college professor, and he saw an infomercial. So when I was 8 years old, it was an infomercial about rental properties, or I think it was Carlton Sheets or someone like that. But he bought the course. He bought a fixer-upper, and that's kind of where I started helping him. And the big joke is I was in charge of scraping lead-based paint with the heat gun. So, but I don't think it did too much damage, but that's the big joke. So, and move fast forward, my dad he was still a college professor, but he was buying and holding houses, single families, and then, little fourplexes and sixplexes. And this was in the early 80s in Detroit. So these were like, 20 grand bought you a twoplex, 50 grand for an eightplex. I mean, it was really affordable back then. I ended up buying a duplex when I was 16. So that was my first property, was a duplex. And little did I know that was my first, I didn't even know what BRRRR was, but that was my first BRRRR. And for most people probably here probably know what it is, but if you don't, it's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So that stupid little duplex that I paid, shouldn't say stupid, that duplex that I paid $40,000 for with $6,000 down on seller financing, was kind of the foundation of everything, 20 years later. It all kind of stemmed from there. So I had that. So I was a 16-year-old, I was managing that when I lived with my parents, and then I went to college. During college, I built a couple spec homes. I got a couple more rentals. And then after college, my best friend and I moved to Park City to be ski bums for a season, and that didn't work out. So we're still here 22 years later. So that I was supposed to go back to Detroit and work with my family in real estate. So I still had those rentals, and the timing was right, and I ended up burning those. I refied, got cash out, and then sold them in 1031 exchange. So a lot of the foundation for me really is BRRRR and then 1031 exchanging, and kind of jumping around a little bit. But then early 2000s, I bought my first flip. I used credit cards. I went to the bank and had a stack of credit cards and told the teller to put a $5,000 cash advance on this one, a $10,000 on this one, $8,000 on this one. So I bought my first house, a flip in Salt Lake from a trustee's sale, and then that sparked my flipping. And then, like Matt said, I bought a ton of HUD homes, and all through the 2000s, I was flipping. When the competition got really rough. Even, it's probably as hard as it is now, right before the big recession. So I had a small multifamily background from my parents, but not too much to speak of. But I ended up, when the competition got bad, that's when I switched over to buying multifamily. And I was thinking, well, I'll flip the multifamily because I don't really want to own these. I don't really like tenants. So I bought right in the middle of my flipping process, the Great Recession came. So all my plans of selling fizzled out, but then ended up being a blessing in disguise because that's what saved me. during the Great Recession. I mean, I had 60 or so doors at the time, and apartments and single family, but a lot of more than half of those were apartments. And that's what really saved me from filing BK or losing everything. So it ended up not being too bad of a deal after all. Moved forward a couple of years, still flipping. That was getting old. So I started selling, and as I was flipping, I was keeping every other or every second or third house and still burring and still refinancing and, buying things and holding them and, owning houses for 10 or 15 years. And, they quadrupled in value, or more. So fast forward, again, I got tired of tenants and tired of flipping. I also got tired of nonstop perpetual deal finding, trying to find 2 or 3 homes every month. And, all I did was walk through stinky houses and Kearns and just the same old, then it just got old. So and also I was really tired of tenants too. So, cause I was self-managing and, during most of this time I was doing everything. I was the plumber, the electrician, the leasing agent, the attorney, all the above. So, I was just getting exhausted and I think my wife was ready to kill me. But so I sold a bunch of things, but still had, I was able to burr, I burred a bunch and then 1031'd a bunch. And then I started buying bigger multifamily, bigger commercial deals. And that's, so now for the last 5 or 6 years, I'm almost exclusively in apartment buildings and mixed use commercial, which, residential, office, and retail. So
dude,
that's kind of the rambling short version. But
no, and there's going to be so many questions that I have for you. And then if anyone else has any specific questions as we get talking, throw them in the chat room. But I wanted to take you back in time a little bit because I was doing a little bit of research before, and you actually maybe specifically talked about this one. So I'm going to share my screen quickly and check this out. This is an MLS purchase from April 6th of 2001. We're talking 19 years ago. You picked this thing up for $98,000. So these are going to be, every listing back in the day that was bank owned basically had the same remarks, right? Like this is so nostalgic.
Right.
Bank owned,
Right.
Sold as is, delete section 10.2, handyman. What is cool about this one, look at your spread on this one of your first flips. Here you go. Well, let's look at the date here.
It couldn't have been too good.
Well, I think it is. Like, so it shows you paid cash, which is maybe your credit cards, right?
Yeah.
So you bought this May 14th, 2001. The new listing goes up May 26th, 2001.
Wow. Jeez.
12 days later.
Fast.
12 days later, you were in and out of that thing in like a month and a half, sold it to an FHA buyer, and you sold it for $126,000 with $2,200 in concessions. Isn't that awesome?
Huh. Look at that. And what's that house today? 350, 300, right?
Yeah.
Something like that's
a 315 house. So this goes, and we'll talk about this. This goes into where I think you've been really smart over the years in when you talked about, you'd flip 1 or 2, keep 1 or 2, right? Like this one, you still own it. You own it free and clear, and it's worth $300,000. And all you did was say yes to a $98,000 purchase from Jeff Jonas.
Right. And if I still owned it, I would have refied it 3 times too. So I would have gotten tax-free cash out a handful of times too. So yeah. And that's really, I mean, that's been the foundation of just doing that with lots of different properties. So
awesome. So we're going to talk some specifics here. One thing though, for, you guys that are new, maybe you are starting the journey of flipping and you're maybe where Tim was in, 2001 to 2010 or whatever. One tip, if you guys have MLS access, and Tim's a great example. There's many people on this call that would be as well. You could search my MLS ID, my old partner, Matt Storheim's, his MLS ID, John Maxim, Tim Watcke. Go back and search their ID on the MLS for their listings, as well as when they were the buyer's agent buying homes. Because what you'll see is you'll start to see a trend of like what people bought stuff for and then what they sold them for, what the condition was when they bought them, what it looked like when it was done. And then you'll start to see the trends of like what needed to be done at certain times in the market. And then, now it'll be drastically different. Like that example of Tim's flips in 2001, these days, like we'd be so tempted to paint the outside, do all this other stuff, which you really didn't need to do back then, right? And so, you know, anyway, so there's just a little
and just
tip
to
there.
see the colors, it's funny. Everything was tan and brown. Like there's no white and gray. You know, it's funny to look through, like a brand new remodel was way different looking than today, just as how styles change. So.
Oh, absolutely. But what's cool is the fundamentals never change, right?
Correct.
Like you need the spread, you know, you need to And so anyway, Tim has literally hundreds of sales activity on the MLS that you guys could spend a whole week and probably learn more just from analyzing his flips than you could with, you know, most courses that you would pay to go to. All right, cool. So I know what a lot of people are interested in. I don't know where you want to go first, but let's first talk in a little bit more detail. I mean, everyone understands what BRRRR is, but where have you seen using the BRRRR method on single family homes and then also on apartments to be the most effective? And like, what are some pitfalls that you've had where it didn't maybe go the way you planned? Like maybe talk a little bit about your strategy with the BRRRR and maybe some different methods that you've specifically used to achieve that, you know, final long-term rental.
Yeah, well, it's I think BRRRR, it's more just it's a fancy way to say a snowball effect, because it's all just snowballing. It starts with one little house. Like back in the day, we were buying houses in Magna for $40,000, and houses in Kearns routinely, without even looking, were 50, 60, 70,000, and that's just what they were listed for, and not multiple offers. There's at any given time, there's a ton to pick from. So all those, you know, you'd buy one, fix it up, and you got 10,000 in equity, 20,000 in equity, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, you have 80,000 in equity, and then you combine a couple of those together, and you know, simultaneously refi a couple for the third or fourth time, and then you take out 300,000 or 400,000, and then you have enough to buy 8-plex, you know, and then you own that for 4 or 5 years, and then, you know, you're with principal pay down and appreciation and improvements. Now you have 800,000, and next thing you know, you're you know, on a 1031 or either a cash out or a 1031, you know, being able to have $1 million, $2 or $3 million, you know, $1, $2 or $3 million, either combining. I would combine a lot of smaller houses. You know, if each one had a couple 100,000 or 100,000 in equity, I'd combine 4 or 5 of them together and just orchestrate the sale as such where I could use all of those proceeds on one deal, and then there's $1 million down payment. So it's really, you know, this is a snowballing effect. So, you know, the time it didn't work out was when well, time heals all wounds, you know, or time fixes everything. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a time where it didn't really work out, but it just meant I held it longer. You know, it wasn't as good as I thought. I couldn't get out as much as I thought. You know, it didn't appraise. You know, I mean, so there's little to no downside on it. You know, worst case, I own a remodeled property but with a lot of equity, so therefore, arguably, it probably cash flows better. You know, and I was not doing. I was never.
I'm sitting here watching.
Hold on, I muted him back. Oh. Sorry.
We're getting hijacked. I was not really focused on cash flow because I knew, you know, cash flow on rentals is not that great, no matter how you cut it. I mean, you own them free and clear, you get a 5 or 6% return. You leverage them, you're getting 5, 6, 7, 8. It's not, you know, it's not that exciting. But the equity build up and principal pay down and, you know, outsourcing your debt obligations to the tenants. I mean, there's so many other benefits where the cash flow is not that important. But so that being said, every penny I had and every bit of free cash went back into the properties, either one property or several properties. So I was always improving, always increasing value. And yeah, so that's, you know, so I can't really think of any downfall to BRRRR. I mean, it's,
when you were doing, maybe when you were starting out and had a lot of those single family homes, how were you financing those? Would you use private or hard money or your own cash?
Usually on the buy. Yeah, the credit card thing only worked a couple of times, but on the buy, I would use a hard money lender in 12%, 33% down. But it was so easy because these were $50,000, $60,000, and $70,000 purchases. So the interest, even at 12%, was $400 a month. So it was a lot different back then. And, you know, I don't recall there being too long of a seasoning process. So I was able to refi pretty quickly. I mean, like it was not 6 months. It was a couple months. So,
and then what kind of banks, and this is kind of one question I wanted, Washington Mutual, and I'm sure it changed a little bit, right? Like you found your go-tos, Countrywide. Okay.
A lot of the ones are no longer in business, but yeah, they were just 20% down. So I never was able, I would have gotten 100% financing if I could. I was never able to. I was always 80% LTVs. So I've never had anything that aggressive, but usually just worked with a broker and they just shopped it. And, you know, ALS, a bunch of like a lot of these banks just had initials and, you know, they do not exist anymore. SLS and, you know.
Yeah.
But all through a broker. A little bit of community banks. But now I'm really a big fan of credit unions right now. Local credit unions are my favorite right now. So, but back then it was more just a conventional mortgage broker because they're all single families.
So, man, we go in so many different directions. So I want to try and keep us on path, but I am interested in one thing that makes a successful real estate investor, in my opinion, is understanding the market and the strategies like you just talked about, right? Like, you know, how to buy right and then, you know, rehab them right and then, you know, turn them into a long-term or flip them. But how do you look at risk? I mean, you know, some people may look at you going, man, you're doing all these houses, you had all these loans. And I know now you probably have more loans than you've had, you know, in a long time, but just in general, how do you look at risk, you know, and maybe it helped just cause you grew up when you're 16. I mean, very few people bought their first duplex when they were 16.
Yeah, I mean, at the Watcke dinner table, when I was growing up, we talked about real estate. We talked about LTV. We talked about tenants, you know, and talked about the war stories with my mom, my dad, and my brother. So it's all I remember. You know, every summer was spent working for my dad on his rental properties. So I'm really comfortable with it. And I know it's sometimes some of the numbers, if you really look at them, are staggering, but I think at the end of the day, it's still a tangible asset. And my leverage is probably portfolio wide, probably not even 70%. So, you know, at the end of the day, like I don't, you know, name, you know, what my answer, if someone said, what about risk? I'd say, well, what's going to happen? You know, I have to lower rents, you know, like what are we afraid of? You know, we have insurance for damages and fire. What if we can't get a tenant? Well, you lower the rent, you know? Like, so like, I think any fear that someone could come up with, I think I'd have a pretty good counter that it wouldn't, you know, I'm not thinking, I mean, look at Corona. On all my apartments, our collections were no different than any other month for April and May. So not even, we had maybe a couple that had to pay a couple weeks later or partial payments, but as of now, everyone's current, just like any other month last year. So, you know, especially multifamily, it's showing how, I think if you're going to risk on anything, it's multifamily, you know, like people need a place to live. If you're not renting it, lower the rent $50. You know, you can go from no calls to lowering the rent $50 to having your phone ring off the hook. So, you know, apartments are inherently easy to fill. So,
dude, that's awesome.
You know, I guess I think there's a lot more risk in development, you know, new development and new construction. But, you know, that's why I wouldn't go all in on that. And that's, you know, I have some of that going right now, but I would not want to be 100% like a merchant builder or, you know, just doing new construction, you know, that. So new construction is only 10% of what I'm doing now. So
awesome. Well, I love what you just said. I think that eliminates a lot of your fears when you just simply ask, what are we afraid of? And then why are we afraid of that? All right, well, here's the answer to that. What's next that we're afraid of?
What's next?
Right?
Yeah. And don't go crazy on the I mean, leverage is awesome, but I mean, if, you know, even with commercial stuff, 70% LTV is about it, maybe 75%. So, you know, that keeps you honest too. You know, even if I want to do 100%, there's not really a way to do that. So I think as long as you have, you know, conservative or realistic leverage, you know, I see very little risk on housing. So
right. Awesome. Cool. I'm going to jump into some of the chats, and then what I want to get into is talking in a little bit more specifics about what you're doing now, including the Maven and the Salt Flats apartments. But Joey Webb asks, how important would you say networking and masterminds have been in your success?
Networking, yeah. I mean, just knowing people. I mean, and like Matt said, I mean, I've been an agent since 2001, and you know, we kind of see the same names and cross the same paths. So I'm not really a big RIA guy or, you know, mastermind or network guy. Other than just knowing people and, you know, doing this is, I don't do many things like this that we're on right now. So it would never hurt. And I think, so yeah, I'm sure it's, you know, knowing the right people is probably better, more important than what you know. It's who you know. But you know, knowing brokers, knowing commercial brokers is probably the best marketing nowadays. The people that actually have the gatekeepers of the deals. You know, that's where if you have to decide who you want to spend your time with and market and network with, it's brokers. You know, that's my opinion. Or the people finding the properties, which is mostly our brokers. So.
Absolutely. And then in the, you know, the smaller word of single family homes, that's going to be those that are going direct to sellers. If you're not going direct to sellers, which may be wholesalers.
Find your wholesalers. Like
yeah. Awesome. Okay. John Prince, what class are you what class are most of your buildings? A, B, or C?
A, B, and buying C's and making them B pluses.
Okay.
So that, when anything I buy there's always a value add component. So I'm under contract on a 30 unit right now in the Avenues. It's hammered. So that's, you'd probably call that a C. You know, it's an A area, but a C or D building. When we're done, we'll spend 30 to 40,000 a door on the remodel, and when we're done, that will be, you know, a B plus in an A area. You know, I think if we're talking A, B, and C, A is going to be, you know, five years old or newer, I would say, and with an elevator, that sort of thing. So I do have a couple A's, but most are the 50s and 60s buildings that are remodeled into as close as you can get to an A without being new. So we
cool.
You know, routinely we'll do new HVAC, new plumbing, every wire, every pipe, every bit of HVAC. You know, every surface is replaced. We don't do lipstick. And never, you know, I probably overspend on the remodels, but knowing that I'm going to keep them for a while, you know, it's worth it. Pay now or pay later in CapEx.
Yep.
So.
Pay now or pay later. Where are most of your, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about some of your Salt Lake stuff. Do you still have either your own or family properties in Michigan?
So my parents still have stuff in Michigan unrelated to me. But I have a shopping center in Ohio. It's a big strip mall. It's that I exchanged. I sold a building in the Avenues and 1031 exchange into that. And I was selling at a 4.5 cap and I bought that at an 8 cap. So it was back in 2016. I still own it. It's not my favorite. You know, retail, there's always a spot for retail, but this is 100,000 square feet. It's gigantic. And we're having some problems there with collections right now. So, but the banks are working with us, and that's my only out of state. Everything else is in Salt Lake City. So cool. I have a condo in Park City, a little nightly rental thing. That's it.
Oh,
so,
right on. Awesome.
But, yeah.
Okay.
So.
Jared Hall has a question. I'll just kind of hit this last question, then we talk about the Maven. So what long-term change do you hope what long-term change do you hope comes from the coronavirus crisis as it relates to your worldview of real estate?
Well, that's a good question. I was thinking back in March, end of March, I was thinking, oh man, the deals are coming in and get that dry powder ready. And I'm going to buy a bunch of buildings. And, you know, it was almost the opposite happened, because if you didn't think that multifamily was a good asset, now when coronavirus hit and everyone's, at least around here, and you know, I'm sure other parts in the country are hit more than we are, but at least around here with collections, 100% collections or same as any other month, you know, no one's fire sailing, because why would they sell? Like, you know, this is, if anything, it's showing this is a much even better, stronger asset than it was before. So, you know, it probably made me want to double down and be all in and even buy more, you know, showing that I hate to say recession proof or impervious, but this is as close as it gets, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of a better asset class, especially after Corona, unless you were talking, you know, Amazon, but you know, that's, yeah, something still tangible, and everyone needs housing. So, you know, I would not say that same thing about my retail and my office. So.
Well, let's start talking a little bit about that. So if anyone hasn't been near, you know, 9th South between what, State and 3rd or 4th East?
Yeah, State and 200 East.
State and 200 East. You're going to notice it now if you haven't noticed it already. So let's talk about your vision. When was that idea planted in you or your wife's head about the Maven? And then talk a little bit about the genesis of it and then what it looks like today.
Okay. My wife owns a Pilates studio, and it used to be called 9th and 9th Pilates. And that was back in 2013, 2014. And I hated paying rent just because I hate doing that. I want to own something. And we couldn't find anything suitable to buy. So we found some vacant old, and these were off market. So these were broker relationships for off market stuff. Everything I bought on that street was off market. We bought one building, and we said, well, let's just build our own building. And, it's for her gym, but also, excuse me, it was also, we wanted to create an ecosystem where it housed a bunch of businesses with similar mission statements underneath one roof. Because my wife, when she was at the Pilates studio working all the time, she often got asked, where do you get your hair done? Where do you get your nails done? Who's your doctor? Who does your eyebrows, eyelashes? Who's your physical therapist? Who's your chiropractor? Who's your social worker, all those things. And, she was just giving everyone all these free recommendations. So we wanted to figure out a spot, how we could, if we're going to build a building, Pilates, spoiler alert, Pilates is not a high profit business, but, we wanted, I didn't want to be all in just on a Pilates studio. So we built a 13,000 square foot building that a third of it was her Pilates studio, and the rest were office spaces, for similar minded businesses. And we have that building has 13 little offices from 120 square feet to about 250 square feet. And we're getting $40 to $80 a square foot for rent, which if you guys are in commercial, that's obscene. That's like Manhattan rents. So, because those tenants, they're little tiny spaces. No one's doing the math on what that is per rent. They just want to know, well, how much is it per month? Oh, it's $700 a month. It's 150 square feet. That's all they know. Oh, I can afford $700. So that was a smashing success. When that building was framed, we rented all those offices just while it's framed. And we were doing the tour with, pretend your office is over here kind of thing. So that was the start. But while we were building that one, we quietly bought 4 other pieces of property on that block, all different sellers. And, instead of just having the building, we wanted to have the district, which would be, not just a building, let's make the whole block like that. And now we're done. We have 71,000 square feet. There's 25 luxury townhomes, and then the rest is office and retail. So, and we're done with the final remodel right now. There's one, so the townhomes were new construction. One building was a new build, and then all the other buildings had been gutted and remodeled extensively. And now we're doing the final right now. One building is almost done, and then we're done. There's nothing else to remodel. Everything that could be remodeled has been remodeled. So
that's awesome. When did you make that first purchase?
2014.
2014.
Yeah, 2014, 15. Yes, it broke ground in 16. So, and then 16. Started buying some of the smaller pieces too. The other buildings that we remodeled. H&R Block used to be a tenant. I was the first person probably ever to not. H&R Block had a renewal option, or no, not an option. Their lease was up last year, and they were willing to pay $25 a square foot. They were paying 12, and we actually told them no because we wanted to do our own co-working space. And that's what we just finished now. So I was probably the first person ever to tell a credit tenant like H&R Block that we're done with you guys. You can move out. So that was really hard for me, but
especially at twice their rent.
Yes. Yeah. And it was above market. Yeah. So, and that's the building we just finished, which is the co-working space right now. We added more storefronts and we have a huge co-working space. So
John Maxim's upset about the Arctic Circle.
I know. FYI. Sorry, John. There's still a couple more in town. We tore down an Arctic Circle to build the townhomes. So I know. Well, people are sad.
People are sad. They'll live. They now have a house to live in. Okay. In relation to this will maybe help answer one of Harry's questions. When you set up partnerships, how do you make it a win-win for everybody involved, or do you avoid partnerships? Maybe you could talk about the Maven. Yeah. I mean, how do you have that one set up?
Yeah. So luckily Maven, it's just me and my wife. So there's no partners on that at all. other than banks. You know, my biggest partner are banks. So
Yeah.
Cypress Credit Union, they've been a really good asset. The townhomes have a HUD loan on, a HUD 5 I forget the name. It doesn't matter, but there's a HUD loan on that one. So really it's equity. I think every property there's 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 different parcels in different sales. Every single one of those was a 1031 into. So
Okay.
I had the equity and then a bank loan. So no partners there. You know, I do have a couple of silent people that give me kind of carte blanche money, and I just give them a return unrelated to any specific project. They're secured somehow, usually in second position somewhere, but they're
not
like
an informal line of credit you have.
Correct.
With
them. They're getting a set return, and that's it. It doesn't matter if the property does well or bad. And then I've done one syndication, which worked out okay, and that's just you know, I have a little bit of experience in that. That was a building in Tooele. But so yeah, I'm not partner adverse, but you know, unless I don't do many partners, you know, unless but I will, you know, and I have a couple things under contract right now with a couple people, but typically on the more informal ones, it's an LLC operating agreement with 3 or 4 people. Each person puts in a couple $100,000, and you know, we all kind of assign our roles, you know. So,
well, your story seems like the long road marathon where you created your own partnership with yourself by just creating that value over time in onesie twosie properties, then in fourplexes, eightplexes, small apartments.
My partner was Tim Watcke in 1993, that duplex that he bought. Like, that was the equity, you know, that was my partner. So
that's so awesome. That is so awesome. This is such a cool story. This probably Tate's question. You're going to keep the Maven? Sounds like most definitely.
Yeah.
That's a
yeah.
keeper.
I mean, everything. Yeah, probably. I mean, 10, 15 years. I mean, I won't say forever, you know, but yeah, there's no plans on selling anything at all.
Because it sounds like now you got to where you saw the vision for it, and now it's just maintenance, maintain, and enjoy.
Yes, yeah, and now it's time to burr, actually, because we spent a ton of money on this last portion of remodel, so I need to burr right now. At least I don't know how much. I won't get a ton of cash out, but I should be able to get my repairs out, and then just let it ride.
So did when you talk about that, how are you going to do that over the however many parcels you have? I forget how many you said, 4 or 5 or 6 different parcels, or will someone do that as a blanket loan against your whole ownership of everything now?
Well, good question. The townhomes are a HUD loan. There's a 10-year, there's a really bad prepayment penalty on that. So those will stay with HUD. The other ones, 3 out of the 4 are Cypress Credit Union already. And one of them's a little bank in Utah County called Rock Union Bank. It's either would be one loan with the same bank. I don't think they're going to require us to combine. You know, if we had, it most likely be one loan, and they'll look at it holistically too. On the commercial side, townhomes are on their own. Everything else would be one loan with, you know, it's probably going to be Cypress Credit Union or University Credit Union if I had to guess.
Awesome. And then that'll keep things simple. How many different loans do you have on it right now? Will that be consolidating maybe 4 or 5 different loans?
Correct. Yeah, there's a bunch. Yeah, there's some seconds and some little, you know, there's probably 6 or 7 right now on all of it.
So
we pay them off.
Are you keeping track of all, or do you have an accountant, or how do you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So several. So I know I used to do everything myself, and now I have a full construction company with a whole bunch of employees, a project manager. All my properties are managed professionally by several different property management companies. So we have a CPA. You know, I do a lot of the financial stuff still, but you know, the day-to-day stuff, accountants handle that. So, and property managers do most. That's the easiest part. I mean, we get reports, and the property managers do all the hard stuff. They do all the hard accounting. So
yeah, right. Cool. And then that one property management company, does it cover your residential as well as commercial stuff?
Yeah, the big one I have, Rockworth is the name of the company. They manage all of my commercial in Utah, and then they also have a residential arm. So there's different, kind of the same head person, but different little sub managers, same company. So, And then I also use Rise Property Management. It has a couple of my properties too.
Awesome.
So.
That's great. So thinking back over the Maven over the last, 6 years, what was there a moment where you look back and it ended up being a super critical decision that you made that turned out to be positive that I don't know, like what was there a point where you were like, oh crap, this is not going to work out?
Well, buying all the properties really. I mean, it was just a pipe dream and, wondering if this was going to work and wondering for overpaying, would people come? I mean, that was probably the biggest fear. Like, cool, we can, I wasn't worried about building a cool building. That's the easiest part, but I didn't want to spend $2 million and if the thing's worth $1 million. That was my biggest fear, that we would have an empty building, or overpaid for something. So yeah, there was tons of fear. I mean, like there was lots of ups and downs. It's been a ride for sure, and in money, like, counting on some 1031 money and then the deal dies and then scrambling and calling Matt to see if he has any money to lend, in third position. So things like that. But
well, it's a tremendous asset to the neighborhood. I have a borrower that is just selling a flip basically right across the street on 228 and Ninth South. Cool. And I'm blown away at his sales price. And there's no way it would be possible without, that infrastructure and, the awesome stuff that you've done across the street. So, and
thanks.
A couple other guys on the call I know have some stuff on that, Ninth South. So it's cool to see. And it's also cool to see the model that, you did need mass though, right? Like this wouldn't have worked to the level if you didn't have quite the mass that you have.
It would be hard. Yeah. And it was hard, my wife's studio was at 9th and 9th. It's 1 mile. The old studio was at 9th and 9th. So it's 1 mile away, but I don't, if people who know Salt Lake City know there's a big difference between 9th South and 9th East and 9th South and 2nd East. So yeah. It was hard to get people to come down and try it. She had a lot of older, wealthier women are her clients, and they'd never been past 7th East, so
yeah, right.
They're afraid, so we definitely had an uphill battle for that too. So, and it's still, it's a gentrifying area right now. I mean, there's a lot of homeless people. I mean, it's, even now, there's the more activity and the more people that we have, filling the block, it's helping, but there's still, I mean, we actually have a security company that comes by 2 or 3 times a night and just drives through all the parking lots to shoo people away, so, and that costs a lot of money, but we're doing that to, I don't have a solution for homelessness, but we just have to get them out of our property. That's, we just have them leave because, we have some parking garages and little alleys and stuff that are just perfect for hiding. Then we have a cookie place there. One of our tenants is Chip Cookies. They throw out, hundreds of cookies a day at night. And of course our dumpsters, it looks like a bunch of raccoons went through them, but it was actually people. So now we have the dumpsters are locked because every morning there'd be a huge cookie mess all over the parking lot, so there, we still have our issues there, but I think it's for people from out of town or from bigger cities, they're used to seeing homeless. But I think people, if you grew up in Utah on the east side somewhere, this is all new. Like you'd be pretty surprised, if you're newly looking for things to rent. And we've lost potential townhome tenants because, there's someone sleeping on the porch, as my guy's showing the unit,
Yeah, right. So, that's not going to help.
yeah. It's hard to talk, but we have stainless steel appliances,
yeah, right.
That doesn't, they can't see past that. So.
It comes with 4 dudes in the backyard, but you got stainless steel.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, we got about 15 minutes more left. I want to talk to you about the Salt Flats apartment. That's one that you're, pretty proud of. Talk about that one really quick.
That was an exchange, a multi-property exchange into the land. I bought the land in 2016 via 1031. And then Bank of Utah did a construction loan for me on that one. And that's 86 units. They're all really small. There's 51 studios and there's 35 one-bedrooms. We have a hot tub, a gym, little, some patio space. Every unit has a balcony. It turned out awesome. It's definitely my favorite project so
remind
far.
Remind the address on that so people can kind of get a visual.
447 East, 100 South.
Okay, 447 East, 100 South. All right, cool. And so amenity-wise there, hot tub, gym. What about parking?
We only were required to have 1/2 space per unit, so that we were required to have what, 43, we have about 50 spaces. So, and it's fine, you know, parking's a la carte, everything's a la carte. You know, 20% of our income is other income, which is parking, utilities, internet, things like that. So we're very parking light, and it hasn't seemed to matter. I mean, we finished March of 19, hit 95% occupancy in November of 19, and since then we've been hovering in the 90s, 95. You know, we're essentially fully occupied right now. So, and
how many square feet are your studios there?
Really small. Measured from the outside and rounding up, we're probably 400 square feet. So 400 to 450.
And what
the
rents
one bedrooms are 5 to 6. Rents start at 1,100 for studios. So our rent per square foot is obscene. So our rent per square foot is awesome there. And they're full. I mean, people like them because it's Class A. It's probably it's one of the cheapest, newest studios you can get. And you know, Salt Lake's expensive now. I think people everyone wants something bigger, of course, but that's $300 or $400 or $500 more. So, all right, good enough. You know, that's what we're seeing. So.
And then how did you find that land? Where'd you source that?
That was an agent that was off market. Agent brought it to me, and the zoning there is RMU, which is a really great zoning. There's not too much RMU left in Salt Lake City, but it did allow either 75 or 85 feet high, 80 feet. I forget that. We were allowed to go high. So we have a 2-story parking structure and then 4 stories of stick-built units above the parking. So,
any significant or unique challenges on that one as you know, with the city or with the land or?
You know, the city, that was easy. Other than it takes a long time for the city, that was all by right. So we didn't have to ask for any zoning variances. There was no permission, no hearings at all. So that was really easy. The loan process was hard there because I was shopping that loan hard in 2016 and 2017. Yeah, early 2017. And actually at the time, a lot of local lenders were getting a little worried about too much new apartment construction in their pipeline. So it was actually hard. That was a little hard to get. Like it took me probably 5 or 6 months to get the actual construction loan. And but I was concurrently having the architects go through permitting, you know, just hoping, you know, that somehow we'll keep working and getting the permit and we'll get a loan here somehow or sell this or something, you know? So yeah. While we turned in for permits and we didn't have a loan yet, you know? So other than the purchase money loan, that was a local bank for a small amount on the 1030, but most of it was 1031 money on the purchase.
And so, and who did you say ended up doing the construction?
Bank of Utah did that.
And then did they go perm with you too, or did you have to get a different loan?
Then I went to Bonneville multifamily. They put me in a CMBS loan just recently. So once we hit stabilization, I was able to get a 10-year fixed term on a CMBS loan. And now today the CMBS market doesn't even exist. So it might come back, but it literally evaporated in March. So.
Well, good timing there. If you don't mind, some questions about just the numbers on this. And if you're not comfortable, don't worry about it. But what'd you pay for the land?
$1.5 million. And there was a little, it was a hearing aid, an art gallery and a hearing aid center with a huge parking lot. It was a little 6,000 square foot building, and it's 0.5 acres.
0.5 acres is all?
Yeah.
And then what was your total construction costs?
Hard and soft. 10 million.
And then you're all in now. So 10 million, you were all in at the end of the day, 11.5, 12 million bucks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of value were you able to achieve on your refinance that you just did, or your permanent financing?
Well, if you believe the appraisal came in at 19,600,000.
Awesome. So you were able
and I got 65% LTV on that.
65%. So you're basically able to get all your money back out of it.
I got all my money out and then some. So
man, that is what the game is about. Starting from your original small duplex in 1995 to this 86 units. It's the same process.
Yeah.
Just bigger numbers and a longer process.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Okay, so that one, now that you've got that put to bed, I imagine you're planning on keeping that for a good long time as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's these CMBS loans have a pretty steep prepayment penalty also, so especially the first 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, it's assumable. So, it's interest only. I locked in at 4.25 or 4.2 something. So it was awesome back in January, but today that's not a great rate, but it is interest only. So the cash flow is awesome. It is assumable if I sold it, but that's a 10-year loan. So a lot of this stuff is probably a conversation in 10 years, 8, 9 years. That's probably when I really think long and hard. Do I want to burr again, which probably, I mean, if it, the way, I don't know, I probably today, I'd probably say I'm going to burr it again, refi again, get more cash out and rinse and repeat. So.
Yeah, dude, that is awesome. That is such a cool story. Okay. So then where you're at now and where are you going? You've been evolving, right? Like you've gone from small to big, like, so what's your next Maven? If you have one in your mind, what's your next like big challenge?
Well, we are building Maven West right now, which is 945 South, 300 West, 945 South, 300 West. It's next to Trails. So we're lovingly referring it. We're calling it Maven Trails. Trails is a strip club for those who pretend like you don't know what it is.
Yeah, but they have good lunch specials
their
for
chicken
steak,
fingers. Their chicken fingers are awesome.
Really good.
Yeah. So we're working on Maven Trails. That's 31 bedrooms. That's a 4-story building. We have about 10,000 square feet of office and retail. We have a coffee shop and a restaurant space on the ground level, and the rest are offices and apartments. And then and that's new construction. That's the only new construction I have in the pipeline, and I'm not really looking for new construction at all. More value add multifamily, remodeling old properties. That's really my strongest. I'm set up the best for that. With systems and crews and construction management in place. If I could just buy, older 20, 30, 40, 50 unit buildings, that's all I do, and burr those. So that's the focus now. I told you earlier, I have a 30 unit under contract that falls right into that category. So, and that's in Salt Lake. So,
and it sounds like now you're pretty well invested your time and your resources in the, Salt Lake, downtown Salt Lake area. Are there other areas that you like that you haven't gone to yet?
No,
I mean,
I have a property in South Salt Lake, have one in Tooele. So it's, most of this stuff is downtown, but I'm pretty agnostic. But out of state, I don't really care to go out of state anymore unless there's a really compelling reason to. So, I'm trying to sell my Ohio property. It's not listed, but I want to get rid of it and just buy multifamily in Utah. So
just sideshow, what led you to buy that one? Was it just opportunistic? A broker brought it to you? Or?
Yeah, I met a broker on Bigger Pockets, and he brought it to me. So it was, I told him I wanted to sell. I didn't want to just buy another Salt Lake building at a 4.5 cap when I just sold one at a 4.5 cap. So it was more of a chasing yield. So, in hindsight, that building did not appreciate. I mean, it maybe appreciated 1% in 4 or 5 years. So, it's not, cash flow's been decent, but it's not as great as I thought. Every time there's a turnover, I'm spending $50,000 in TI, tenant improvements, and $30,000 in commissions. Like it's a kind of a different animal to these little small spaces where there's no TI.
Yeah, so. Right. Well, this has just been fabulous. I've learned a ton, and we're kind of wrapping up here, but man, I think what you're doing is so incredible, and I didn't realize the scope of all that you're doing. So it's super cool to hear about. And then we'll be visiting, Maven. A lot of people have asked what the exact address is. So if they haven't already been on the radar.
The mothership, the whole thing's called the Maven District. So the townhomes are 135 East. There's 6. So everything's on 9 South. So 135 East, 900 South are the townhomes. Moving east, we have a white building, which has 6 commercial units. That's 145 East. Next to the white building is that was a remodel building. Next to that one is the black building, which I built. That's 155 East. That's the 13,000 square foot building with the Pilates studio. Then there's Randy's Records. I don't own that. But then next to Randy's Records, there's 167 East, which is a 3-unit little strip mall where there's a Jed's Barber and normal ice cream. And then finally at the end is 179 east, 900 south. That's a 14,000 square foot office. There's 6 storefronts there, and then the rest is office, and there's an event space there too. And that's a building we're just finishing up now.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, Tim, I appreciate it, man. This has been great to chat with you. And I know everybody is very grateful as well. And you need to do more of this, man. You're just a natural speaker. Maybe you come out with your own course one day, you know?
Yeah. There's more money in courses than there's in real estate, right?
I don't know. Not the way you're doing it. I think you're doing okay. All right, buddy. Well, have a great day. Thanks so much. And we'll be in touch offline.